Good morning. First, I have two pieces of information, good and bad. The good news is that, as a rule, Volkswagen has quite decently protected the Passat B6 from rust. The bad news is that a significant portion of these cars are simply worn out, and corrosion is starting to become a problem anyway. It usually starts with the rear wheel arches or the boot lid IE elements that are not important for keeping the body in one piece. But many Passat B6s have had some kind of collision or accident and were repaired in an unprofessional manner, which is why, in practice, corrosion problems are not the exception, but the rule. In addition, many examples, including those without accidents, have partially faulty lighting, especially the rear ones. The lights are very poorly protected against moisture. The electrical system, electronics, and other, more broadly understood equipment elements are not ideal either. For example, automatic air conditioning can cause problems, as well as the electric steering column lock. In the past, this was dealt with by replacing the entire column. Now it is possible to repair only the locking mechanism, which is of course much more cost-effective. There is a chance of staying within the 3-digit amount. The comfort module can also fail. Many people report that the quality of the interior is noticeably worse than in the facelifted Passat B5. When it comes to brakes, typical faults include a faulty auxiliary brake system. Sometimes it's the fault of the system's actuators themselves, and sometimes the switch in the interior. There are usually no sudden problems with service brakes, similarly to the suspension. Here, you should expect at most accelerated wear of elements, such as stabilizer links. Many sources complain about the suspension's work on uneven surfaces, but this is usually not due to damage and wear, and this type is magically like that. The Volkswagen Passat B6 was offered with the following petrol engines: 1.6, 102 HP, 1.6, FSI, 115 HP, 1.4 TSI, 122 HP, 1.4 TSI EcoFuel, 150 HP, 2.0 FSI, 150 HP, 1.8 TSI, 152-160 HP, 2.0 TFSI, 200 HP, 2.0 TSI, 200 HP, 3.2 V6 FSI, in practice, VR6, 250 HP, 3.6 V6 FSI, as above, 280 HP, R36, 3.6 V6 FSI with 300 HP. First, a glossary. FSI are naturally aspirated engines with direct fuel injection, while TSI and TFSI are direct injection and turbocharged engines. EcoFuel is a variant powered by natural gas. At first glance, an absolute revelation, something for everyone. In practice, it is at best average, and according to some sources, everything else you see every day has a more recommendable range of engines, from Peugeot 508s to kebab stands. In reality, you can choose something from this palette, although maybe it should be said, you could choose something, because the Passat B6s are simply getting old, and it is difficult to find a well-maintained example. The safest choice is the basic 1.6 MPI engine. It is the only one in the range with indirect fuel injection, and is great for LPG. It is not completely bulletproof and problem-free, but its typical problems, such as limited durability of ignition coils or clogged throttle valve, do not change the fact that it is simply a successful, simple, and cheap-to-repair engine. Oil consumption sometimes occurs here, but it is rather rare to talk about extreme values. The 1.6 FSI engine is average. Due to the use of direct injection, we have problems with carbon deposits, and in addition there are problems with the non-durable timing drive. A chain is used here. The 1.6 MPI has a belt. What's more, the manufacturer recommends using 98-octane petrol in these engines. Filling up with the popular 95 may result in a deterioration in performance. The same remark regarding petrol applies to the 150 horsepower 2.0 FSI engine, which is in any case more recommendable than its smaller colleague. Of course, here too, carbon deposits must be taken into account. The 1.4 TSI unit is an engine from the older EA111 series, i.e., the one with a timing chain drive. The newer EA211, not used in the Passat B6, has a timing belt. The chain should not be considered an advantage here, because it is not durable. Initially, this was a significant problem, but fortunately the prices of such timing drive kits are now decent enough that you can somehow live with it. Typical faults also include oil consumption, head gasket damage or uneven operation, as well as problems with the turbocharger or exhaust gas cleaning system. In practice, however, they are not extremely troublesome, and if everything is okay with the timing chain, you can drive such a car for quite a long distance without any problems, provided that we are not talking about the EcoFuel version, which is a cleverly camouflaged twin-charger engine with a turbocharger and a mechanical compressor, and a total dud in which the pistons can even break. The compressor clutch is also prone to failure. Next in line are the 2.0 TFSI, 1.8 TSI, and 2.0 TSI engines. The former has the 2.0 T designation on the tailgate and, because it belongs to the EA113 family, is the only one of the three that is suitable for anything other than throwing you off a cliff. Don't think the 2.0 TFSI is particularly recommendable. If it is, it isn't. But you can live with it, although it does have problems, such as excessive oil consumption, carbon buildup, intake shaft wear, oil pumps, crankcase ventilation valve, turbine, high-pressure pump or camshaft chain tensioner. And, you understand, the 1.8 and 2.0 TSI from the EA888 series enter all this and say Pat Terra, after which they start to use more oil than a seaside fish fryer in the peak season, which is caused by the faulty design of these engines, including too thin piston rings. And now we are talking about a situation when the owner of the car manages to seize up such an engine. In addition, the EA888 General 2 units, i.e. those installed in the VW Passat B6, have problems with the timing drive, with leaks, with ignition coils, with carbon deposits. The 3.2 VR6 engine landed almost at the top of the range. You might expect that since the Volkswagen Passat B6 shared most of its engines with the Audi A3 AP, among others, that it would be the same in this case, but not entirely. The thing is that Audi used a VR6 engine with multi-point fuel injection, this is less important, and a different angle of the cylinder banks. In such an A3 it was 15 degrees, while in the Passat only 10.6 degrees, which is related to the fact that this variant of the VR6 engine was based on a slightly older 3.6 VR6 FSI unit, also used in the B6, although on our market, only in the top version, R36. This does not change the fact that VR6 units are considered durable, provided they are properly serviced. Any problems usually concern ignition coils, rather in older models, oil leaks or carbon deposits on the intake valves, which can lead to reduced performance, the appearance of the check engine light, or problems with starting the drive unit. The head gasket can also burn out, and sometimes the timing drive fails. The 6th generation Volkswagen Passat was available with the following diesel engines: 1.6 TDI, 105 HP, 1.9 TDI, 105 HP, 2.0 TDI PD, 120-170 HP, 2.0 TDI CR, 110-170 HP. PD in the 2.0 TDI engine designations means Pompe Douce and CR common rail supply. The 1.6 TDI engine has CR supply, and the 1.9 TDI PD. Let's start with the 1.9 TDI engine, or rather engines, because the Passat B6 had the BKC, BXE, and BLS versions. It would be a good idea to avoid the BXE version, because it is known for problems with the connecting rod bearings. It is difficult to estimate how the other two versions look in this respect, because the internet is filled with passionate discussions of mechanics who argue about it. Apart from more or less certain problems with the bearings, it is difficult to find faults in the 1.9 TDI that would surprise a mechanic. Of course, you have to remember that these cars can be simply worn out, but assuming that by some miracle you come across a reasonable example, then the first thing you should consider is possible oil leaks or damage to the exhaust gas recirculation, e.g. R valve. Nothing terrible, just like damage to the valve cover gasket. It is worse if the cylinder head gasket fails, but this is not a plague. Watch out for the DPF filter. It was optional here. Passat B6 with 1.9 TDI engines were produced until October 2008. Later, in August 2009, they were replaced by a 1.6 TDI unit with the same power. Without further ado, the 1.6 TDI is also an engine quite worth recommending. It does have a rather sensitive to fuel quality and generally not very durable injection system, a not very durable dual-mass flywheel, a DPF filter, it was standard, and a turbocharger. And it can also treat the user with oil and coolant leaks, but compared to the competition, it is definitely not a bad engine. Compared to the 1.9 TDI, it is not either. It is worth considering shortening the timing belt replacement interval with the water pump to 150 or even 120,000 kilometers due to the limited durability of this pump. If the EGR valve fails, the bill will probably exceed 1,000 Polish zlotys because this valve is integrated with the exhaust gas cooler and is not the cheapest. The last option was the 2.0 TDI engines. Initially, versions with unit injectors were offered, which due to numerous serious problems are not suitable for recommendation, unless we are talking about heavily invested, repaired copies. Here we have emergency oil pumps and precisely unit injectors. Heads can crack, although many copies have already had them replaced. In cars with a particulate filter, you have to reckon with the risk of diluting the engine oil with fuel. One of the few advantages of the 2.0 TDI PD from the utility and service side is the fact that most versions of DPF simply did not have it from the factory. The exceptions include the 136 horsepower engine with the internal code BMA, the 140 horsepower BMP, and the 170 horsepower BMR. The 2.0 TDI Crossing from the EA189 family has always been factory equipped with a DPF, but it is still a much better option than the 2.0 TDI PD, although more expensive, because it is younger and more successful. Here, attention should be paid mainly to the dual mass and timing drive. In practice, the 2.0 TDI Crossing is not only the best diesel in the VW Passat B6 range, but, according to many, also the best engine that was on offer. The following gearboxes were available for the VW Passat B6. 5-speed manual, standard in the 1.6 MPI petrol version and in diesel engines, 1.6 and 1.9 TDI and 2.0 TDI PDCR with power from 110 to 122 HP. 6-speed manual, standard on all other versions except those with VR6 engines. 6-speed Tiptronic automatic, option on 1.6 and 2.0 FSI and 1.8 and 2.0 TFS. 7-speed double-clutch gearbox DSG, option on 1.4 and 1.8 TSI. 6-speed double-clutch gearbox DSG, option on 2.0 diesel engines from 136 HP upwards, standard on VR6 models. Manual gearboxes shouldn't cause any problems. If something goes wrong, it may be the synchronizers of the first two gears in the 6-speed manual transmission. You don't have to be particularly afraid of the 6-speed Tiptronic either. It's an ordinary, hydrokinetic, and quite successful automatic, although of course, like an automatic, it requires professional servicing and regular oil changes. Even more professional servicing and even more regular oil changes can be useful in the case of DSG gearboxes, both the simpler 7-speed gearbox with dry clutches and the more durable 6-speed gearbox with wet clutches. There is no point in exceeding 40 maximum 50,000 kilometers between oil changes. Neglecting this operation can significantly accelerate the need for gearbox overhaul. In addition to the wear and tear of the internals, you can also encounter DSG controller failures. In front-wheel drive cars, you don't have to worry about the durability of the drive system. But 4. Motion with Haldex aren't bad either, although for example, damage to the differential mechanism can happen. When you change the oil in the DSG, it's worth doing the same with Haldex. But somehow not very tragically either. Well, unless you get one of the few mines offered by the manufacturer, or buy a worn-out model. And let's be honest, most models on the market deserve this title. Then all that's left to do is pray that it doesn't break down too soon. In any case, there's no hiding the fact that the Passat B6 is simply a quality failure of Volkswagen, and nothing will change that. The facelifted version, simply the Passat B7, was more refined, but that's a completely different level of costs. And if you know of any common errors, your comments are welcome.
Camipro Website ist Katalog aller Automarken, Motoren, Getriebe, was bricht und bei welchem Kilometerstand. Welche Pakete können Ihre Tasche hart belasten? Dieses und vieles mehr über Autos erfahren Sie auf Camipro.